I got the strange feeling that Donald Trump doesn't want to win this election because it's easier to complain and whine and lie than it is doing a job and doing what needs to be done to be elected, as in campaigning, as in fighting for votes. And I don't think Donald Trump is wanting to do that. And to help me illustrate that point, I'm going to read you an article from Heather Digsby Parton from Salon.com. Why Donald Trump thinks he doesn't have to campaign against Kamala Harris. There's a reason why Trump would rather whine than win. He's preparing for the post-election Big Lie 2.0. One of the articles of faith about the 2020 election among the MAGA crowd is that Joe Biden couldn't possibly have won the election because he, quoting them, campaigned from his basement, unquote, and never spoke before the big crowds as Donald Trump did. Biden didn't campaign from his basement, of course, but he did run a very non-traditional campaign because the whole country was under a modified lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Large indoor gatherings that did take place, such as the one by Trump held in Tulsa during that summer, were super spreader events that that ended up with many people getting sick and some dying. Unlike Trump, Biden followed the advice of scientists and found ways to campaign without unnecessary exposure to the virus. Despite all that, Trump and the right-wing media insisted that Biden must have cheated because he didn't barnstorm all over the country. So what are we to make of the fact that in this campaign, Trump can barely rouse himself to leave his cushy surroundings at Mar-a-Lago and is more likely to be found on the golf course than giving a speech or holding a rally? Sure, Trump does some campaigning, but at a much slower pace than he did his first two runs. He's doing some non-traditional media, appearing on podcasts and giving interviews over the phone or at Mar-a-Lago. And he's appeared at some right-wing media confabs and made a foray to a plant in Pennsylvania last week. But the events are few and far in between to the past. He even skipped the traditional Labor Day blitz that every presidential candidate does as the kickoff to the fall campaign. But even if they have nothing positive to say about unions, Republican candidates always take advantage of the fact that people have a day off and are waking up to the fact that the campaign has begun. They usually fly around the various venues and hold rallies or show up at the state fair, as Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz did this Monday. Trump did nothing. He didn't hold even one public event. And while UPI reported that he was to hold a video call with current and retired members of the UAW, the United Auto Workers, I can find no record of it happening. His only campaign this whole week isn't scheduled till Wednesday in Wisconsin. As mentioned, he's doing media, but even that is far less energetic than we're used to seeing from him. Last night, he did an obscure X interview show and seemed delusional and depressed. If it were anyone else, I would have to say he popped an Xanax before he went on. And the rallies he's doing are boring rehashes of the same old tunes. One could almost say that Trump is campaigning from his basement. The question is why? He knows what it takes to campaign for president. It's been his life's work for the past decade. I might guess that he's still very spooked about the assassination attempt, and you notice I'm putting air quotes under assassination attempt, and is resistant to go before the public. I can't say I would blame him. It was a very close call and it would freak anyone out. He would never admit that, of course. Or maybe it's just that his heart really isn't in it right now, because he thinks that the Supreme Court has given him a get-out-of-jail-free card with its immunity ruling. And it's also possible that his age has caught up with him and just doesn't have the strength and the stamina to campaign properly anymore. He has never looked so frail, and some of the things he's saying are simply delusional. For instance, at a recent Moms for Liberty gathering, he made an insane claim that schools are performing transgendered surgery on kids.
Almost nobody in this room wants, who I think 85-90% of the country doesn't want if they actually.
I absolutely agree.
But the transgender thing is incredible. Think of it. Your kid goes to school and comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen with your child. And you know, many of these childs, 15 years later, say, what the hell happened? Who did this to me?
Before Biden withdrew, there was a lot of loose talk coming from the campaign that Democratic states like New Jersey and New Mexico were in play. That was always hype, but Trump's team were extremely confident that they had the election in the bag. Today, not so much. The Boston Globe reported that the top volunteer in New Hampshire has informed the staff that the campaign has determined that the state is no longer a battleground state. That volunteer, of course, was fired. And Appalach, which tracks political advertising, released some startling numbers on Monday that seemed to confirm his disclosure. You notice that the Trump campaign is only competing in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia, and all the other swing states are apparently being left to their own devices. This is surprising, to say the least. They do have less money to play with than the Democrats, but you'd think that they'd at least try to hedge their bets. But the consensus that they have decided that they cannot hold to all their 2020 states, they will put up all their money on picking up those two states, which will bring them exactly 270 electoral votes. If they lose either one, or North Carolina, that's the ball game. Just as likely, they're really just planning on a post-election legal challenge in any or all of those states, claiming that the Democrats stole the election. You can certainly bet if they do it in Pennsylvania and Georgia, where they are already plotting with local officials. Trump himself has repeatedly said that, quoting him, "Our primary focus is not to get out the vote, is to make sure that they don't cheat," unquote. If they can find a way to throw the election to the House, as they wanted to do in 2020, they will win. And I kind of suspect that Trump would actually prefer to do it that way. It's the ultimate power play to make Democrats lose through a post-election ploy that engineered by Trump and his cronies. In his twisted mind, I think that would validate his big lie. All of this probably explains why Trump isn't really bothering the campaign so much. He'll spend some time in Pennsylvania and Georgia and make some perfunctory stops in some of the other swing states just to keep it close enough to contrast. He'll keep doing right-wing media for the purpose of which is as much to keep his followers charged up about the alleged stealing of anything else. But unless he wins those two big states, which he might, he's preparing for the post-election big lie 2.0. He's old and tired, and at this point, I think he'd ever actually whine than win. That's the end of the article. Now you know what Donald Trump is plotting to do. It may include a January 6th style attack on the U.S. Capitol or the White House or anywhere in this country when Donald Trump gives the word. But this is the real plot. He wants to keep it as close as he possibly can, so if he loses, his cronies in Congress will steal the election for him. The problem is that's not going to work. Donald Trump is going to have to fight to get reelected. And he is doing a terrible job, especially with that little clip I just showed you about some idiotic conspiracy to turn kids gay or transgendered. Not to mention his idiotic excuses and defenses by his supporters about him desecrating Arlington National Cemetery and everything else in between. Trump has got a long hill to ride for him to be reelected. But that doesn't mean we can slow down or relax. We have to continue to fight because Donald Trump isn't slowing down. Even though he looks like a tired old man, he is not giving up and he's not slowing down. We have to beat him and beat him decisively that he's crying, literally crying, that he's being abused by the American people at the voter box. CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right. Fight with our votes.